Ladies and gentlemen, if you see something here that you like, this is a new channel, so if you will, subscribe. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host and teacher for this lesson. My name is Mr. Smith, Senor Smith, Herr Schmidt. And the lesson for today is, does Black history mean diversity? Because in public schools, we're finding out that a lot of people are saying, well, it's about diversity. Black history is really about diversity. No. Chinese history is about Chinese people and their history, right? German history is about German people and their history. So why is Black history about diversity? So what I thought I would do is we're going to look into some Black history today. And boy, some of the things I found out, some of you guys, it's going to blow your mind. So man, I'm excited. And so let's get started, shall we? Let's start off with, let me sit up for this. Start off with this article. This is a letter that Benjamin Franklin wrote, and I'm going to read it, and we're going to look at it. And this was written in 1711, I believe. Very early 1700s. Here we go. Quote, "Why should the Palatine boors be suffered to swarm into our settlements, and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens, who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs, any more than they can acquire our complexion?" What? Acquire our complexion? Wait a minute. So Ben Franklin's saying that these Palatine boors who settled into Pennsylvania have a different, that are from Germany, have a different complexion? Interesting. Let's read further, shall we? Quote, "Which leads me to add one remark," this is Ben Franklin, "that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionably very small. All Africa is black or tawny. Asia, chiefly tawny." Interesting. "America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so." What? Franklin is saying America is black or tawny, except for the newcomers, meaning him. Wow. Get this, and it goes on. "And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Sweden are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion." Now, let's define swarthy. Black colored, dark colored, especially of skin. Wow. And that's where the German word Schwarz comes from, or Schwarze, I think it's pronounced, which generally refers to black person. Oh, and by the way, what is tawny? Tan colored. So Ben Franklin is saying the majority of people in Europe and in America are black, swarthy, or tawny. Okay, tan color. Tawny would be maybe like a Steph Curry color. If you guys know who Steph Curry is, basketball player. Wow. All right, so let's move on. So he goes on to say, Well, let's recap. He says, and in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion. What? Also, as are the Germans also. Wait a minute. I thought the Germans were the blonde-haired, blue-eyed folks. I mean, they are, but the modern Germans. Wow. I mean, this is just mind-boggling. I was never taught this in school. Wait a minute. Ben Franklin is saying most of the Germans back in the day were swarthy or dark-skinned. Interesting. The Saxons only accepted, meaning the Saxons were not dark-skinned, is what he's saying, who, with the English, make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. Fascinating. I could wish their numbers were increased, referring to the English or Saxons. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? That's a whole other thing. Ben Franklin talks about the light to the eyes of the inhabitants in Mars and Venus. I don't know what's going on there, but let's save that for another time. Okay, I want to just concentrate on Ben Franklin telling everybody that the majority of people in Europe and America are black, tawny, or swarthy. Okay? He says, why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks and tawnies of increasing the lovely white and red? Gee, Ben. Yeah. Well, I guess he didn't really want... Well, let's finish. But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. True. People hang out with their own race a lot and prefer that. Interesting, though, huh? Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin just... wow, he just dropped a bomb. Now, he starts off by saying, why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements? And he called them swarthy. So who are these Palatine Boers that they don't want to deal with, that Ben Franklin doesn't want to deal with? Let's look it up. Okay? And I got it right here. So we're moving over here. The German Palatines were early 18th century immigrants from the Middle Rhine region of the Holy Roman Empire. What? Wait a minute. Germany was part of the Holy Roman Empire in the early 18th century, in the 1700s? Says it right here. That's a whole other thing. That is for another day. But I will tell you this, Germany was named after one of the Roman emperors. What was his name? Germanicus. That kind of makes sense. Okay, including a minority from the Palatinate, by which the entire group was known. Again, referring to the Palatines. And by the way, Ben Franklin, man, he was harsh. He called the Palatine Boers, which is kind of an old-style word for uncultured, uncouth, right? If you have boorish manners, you are uncouth, uncultured. Anyway, so he refers to the Palatines as Boers. Anyway, let's continue. They immigrated to England as refugees and were both Protestant and Catholic farmers. Towards the end of the 17th century and into the 18th, so 1600s to 1700s, the wealthy region was repeatedly invaded by French troops. During the religious wars, they imposed continuous military requisitions, causing widespread devastation and famine. The winter of 1708 was notably cold, resulting in further hardships. The term poor Palatines referred to some 13,000 Germans who emigrated to England between May and November 1709 seeking refuge. Their arrival in England and the inability of the British government to integrate them caused... I wonder why the British government couldn't integrate them. That's interesting. Caused a highly politicized debate over the merits of immigration. The English tried to settle them in England, Ireland, and North American colonies to strengthen their position abroad. Anyway, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the Palatine settlements did not prove to be viable in the long term, except for those settled in County Limerick and County Wexford in Ireland. Wow. So we got these swarthy people, black-skinned people, dark-skinned people, going from Germany to England, and they settled into Ireland. And in the colony of New York, in British North America. Wow. So they settled in New York. Interesting. Now, there's more on this, but let's go down here. The English transported, could that be as poor immigrants or possibly slaves? Nearly 3,000 German Palatines in 10 ships to New York in 1710. And of course, this is right when good old Ben wrote his letter about the Palatine Boers moving up into Pennsylvania as well. Interesting. And they called it, that's where they get maybe Germantown in New York. So let's move down a little bit. Oh, there we go. All right, so let's continue on with these Palatines from Germany. All right, so they are dark-skinned, went to England, then into Ireland. And let's read a little bit more about this. There's a lot here, but you can read it on your own time. Look what it says here. The British Crown believed that the Palatines could work and be, quote, useful to this kingdom, particularly in the production of naval stores. Okay, so the British government was thinking of putting these Palatines to work. Okay, could be just working, but could also be a slavery thing? I don't know. Okay. Now, here's something interesting also as well about the Palatines. In the winter of 1712 and 1713, 6 Palatines approached the Mohawk clan mothers to ask for permission to settle in the Shakopee River Valley, a tributary of the Mohawk River. This is obviously in the United States. The clan mothers, moved by the story of the misery and suffering, granted the Palatines permission to settle. In the spring of 1713, about 150 Palatine families moved into the Shakopee Valley. I think that's how you pronounce it. The Palatines had not understood that the Haudenosaunee were a matriarchal kinship society and that the clan mothers had considerable power. They headed the 9 clans that made up the 5 nations. The Palatines had expected to meet their male sachems rather than these women, but property and descent were passed through the maternal lines. My point of bringing that up is that these Palatines were accepted by the Mohawks. I don't know. So that gives further evidence that the Palatines were not Caucasian Germans. Anyway, so that's, but again, hey. So are you saying, Mr. Smith, that the Europeans were all black? I didn't say that. Ben Franklin said that. So I don't know if you don't want to believe good old Ben. I don't think he was the greatest guy in the world, but I don't think he's lying there. So we'll see. Now, next thing, Black Europeans. Let's take a look. Here we go. King James I of England was a black man. Yeah, he looks pretty swarthy. I like that word now. It's almost like smooth. All right, swarthy. Anyway, let's read this. King James I of England, who authorized the translation of the now famous King James Bible, was considered by many to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest monarchs that England has ever seen. All right, and if you don't know, King James reigned, he lived from 1566 to 1625. Okay? Now, we've heard it, I've heard of the iconoclast, which is a word where they, quote, whitewashed a lot of images. All right, so, and these images here show them as look at this coin here. Wow. Okay, let's read on. It's Black history here, folks. At a time when only, let's go back. Okay, so it says he was one of the greatest monarchs that England had ever seen. Through the wisdom and determination, he unified the warring tribes of Scotland into a unified nation, and then joined England and Scotland to form the foundation for what is now known as the British Empire. Wait a minute. So you're telling me, so who's the British royal family today? I mean, they're pretty light-skinned, right? Well, we'll look at it. We'll look at that at the end. Okay? Look at that. Let me lay back here and settle into this. Okay? Let's read on here. Okay, King James' desire was that the common people should have the Bible in their native tongue. Thus, in 1603, King James called 54 of history's most learned men together to accomplish the great task, meaning to translate the Bible from ancient Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic to English. And it goes on here. King James was a king of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. Okay, so again, this is the King James of the KJV Bible. He had it translated, he had the scriptures translated from ancient Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek to English. What else we got here? The King James translation had a significant influence on the English language and was widely accepted as the standard English Bible. A little history about King James here and what he accomplished. They started a whole lie, they meaning I guess we can call them Romans. They started the whole lie and said King James was a homosexual. The one who started this rumor was Anthony Weldon. He wanted vengeance for being excluded from King James's court. So in 1650, 25 years after the death of King James, Weldon saw his chance. He wrote a paper calling James a homosexual. Obviously, James being dead was in no condition to defend himself. Yeah. Dead men tell no tales, right? Oof. The report was largely ignored since there were still enough people alive who knew this wasn't true. In fact, it lay dormant for years until recently when it was picked up by Christians who hoped that vilifying King James would tarnish the Bible. That's interesting. Why would Christians want to tarnish the Bible? That's for another discussion. Okay, that is for another discussion. Interesting stuff. It seems, though, that Weldon's false account is working because a lot of the people refuse to read or get to know the book because of this elaborate and demeaning lie. Okay, in other words, what they're saying here is that this Weldon guy who tarnished King James' reputation is causing people not to look into the Bible. Okay. He was the first king to sit on 3 thrones at once, which was Scotland, England, and Northern Ireland. And you can read a lot more about this stuff, but there are pictures now. So King James of England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland was a black man. Okay, and that goes hand in hand with what good old Ben Franklin was saying. So who are the British family today? Well, we're going to look at that. We'll get to that. But I also wanted to look at this thing right here. Everybody, look at this. Here's a picture. It's a portrait by Jean Mostart. He painted, it's a portrait of a nobleman guest of the Queen of Austria, early 1500s. And take a look at this guy. That is a black man. And it's, I think the painter kind of painted his right hand very small. He's got a little gold glove. Anyway. But that clearly is a black fella. Oh, and then this picture right here. This is from the coat of arms of Belgium. That's a very dark-skinned man right there. And guess what he's got on his head? He's got this thing right here. Right? Well, when you wrap something around your head like this, especially, and it's hanging off. Now, I figured, let's go to, in the Bible, Exodus 28 and 4. I want to read something for you here. Okay? Now, this is, let's just read it. Here we go. And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, and an ephod, and a robe, and a broidered coat, a mitre, and a girdle. And they shall make holy garments for Aaron, thy brother, and his sons, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. So that's God telling the Israelites the garments they're going to give Aaron and his brothers. And one of the garments is a mitre. So this mitre thing even goes back to biblical times. Interesting. Fascinating. All right, but back to this. 1500s, you see a black nobleman there. And then the coat of arms of Belgium, you see a dark-skinned fella there. Is that maybe the reason why they call that period the Dark Ages? Possibly. We were told in the Dark Ages, all of a sudden everything just, they didn't record anything, they didn't learn anything, they didn't do anything with it. They all just went for 100 years, and then all of a sudden, they came back. It doesn't work that way, folks. It just doesn't work that way. People don't just all of a sudden do that. So that's very suspect. Anyway, so let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to look at who's the British royal family today. If King James was a black man, and you see these other Europeans were black, let's look at the British royal family today. Let's take a look. So we're going to move to this. All right, now, oh, there we go. Okay, the Wettin dynasty of Saxony. That's who the British royalty is today. I'm just going to read a lot of this I'm just going to read parts of this on here. The Wettin dynasty of Saxony, a major influence on the Reformation in Germany and ancestors of the British royal family. Okay. The Wettin dynasty can be traced back to the 10th century. They came to prominence in 1089 when they were made rulers of Meissen. In 1263, they became landgraves of Thuringia, and in 1423, Frederick I was invested as Duke of Saxony. Okay, so you remember Ben Franklin described the Saxons as Caucasian, right? They were white, so these folks are white. And get this, okay, so Frederick I of the Wettin family was invested as Duke of Saxony, becoming one of the 7 prince electors of the Holy Roman Empire. What the Wettin family today, right? There's Prince Elizabeth. Man, she's wearing that yellow. She's rocking that yellow, right? And we also have here a picture of Prince Albert. These are both from the Wettin family. Let's read what it says here about the British royal family. In Britain, the best known member of the family, meaning the Wettin family, is Prince Albert, who became the husband of Queen Victoria and was thus the ancestor of all monarchs of Britain since Victoria's death. Okay, but when was this? He was the 7 times grandson of John Frederick I, the Wettin Saxony guy, defeated by Emperor Charles V at Mulberg. From the accession of Edward VII in 1901, the official name of the British royal family was Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Okay, let's think about that for a second. From the accession of Edward VII in 1901, wait a minute. So the British royal family that we know today didn't really come into prominence until 1901, if I'm understanding that correctly. So they were not the same British royal family of a long time ago, before this. Let's read on. The official name of the British royal family at this time, 1901, was the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Anti-German sentiment during the First World War meant that a change was needed. So they're admitting that the Wettin family and the British royal family today originated in Germany. They rejected Wettin as an alternative and instead adopted the current name of House of Windsor in 1917. And that is your British royal family today. Wow. Well, so let's summarize. Ben Franklin admitted that most of the people of Europe were black, tawny, or swarthy. Swarthy means black. He admitted that the Palatine Boers were dark-skinned and came from Germany. And he didn't really want them in there. That's neither here nor there. And we looked at King James and we looked at pictures, so interesting, right? So if King James was a black man over England, Ireland, and Scotland, there was probably a lot of other black folk there. And they came over. So some of them came over as free men, maybe, right? And some came over as slaves. Now, does that mean none of them came from Africa? No. Right? We'll look into that another day. We'll tie it all in at some later time. But I want to pose a question to everybody because this would be a great discussion, and I would welcome people to comment on this, what I'm about to say. We were always taught that black folks took their slave owners' names. And that's how they got their names, right? But if a lot of them came from England and Ireland, which seems to be the case, maybe some of them didn't take their slave owners' names. Maybe that is their name. So I'm curious. Like I knew a black girl. Her last name was McFadden. Maybe that's her real. Maybe that's her family name. Maybe it wasn't a slave owner. So that's something I'm really curious to see if anybody out there has any information on that or knows whether their name was their family name. Because you'd think if, as brutal as American slavery was, you'd think these people would say, nah, I'm not taking my slave owner's name. I'm out of here. Right? So let's just leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. There is going to be a lot more things to come, and this is stuff that they're not going to teach you in school. And I would love at some point in the future to have a discussion about, did black folks take their slave owners' names, or are they their family names for going back to the King James time? So we'll leave with that. I'm your humble servant, Mr. Schmeeth. And hey, have a good one until next time. Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you've seen my first lesson, and there's a lot more to come. And I think it's safe to say that you're learning some valuable stuff, and you will continue to learn valuable stuff, knowledge that they don't teach you anywhere else. So hit that subscribe button and hit that like button.